Welcome to my workshop again. It's been a while. Haven't had too many games come in. Yeah, but so I got this Williams Indiana Jones. So a friend of mine bought this, and it was fully redone, from what we were told, and from what you see. You look at this playfield, and it was. Either an overlay or something. Something. This thing was completely redone. Some of these plastics are original, but the playfield plastics are new. The rails were new. The Path of Adventure is original. And then the decal. They did a cabinet decals. So this thing is spotless as far as the cabinet goes. New gun. New coin door, new lockdown. So this thing looked phenomenal, and you see inside it still has the incandescence, and it's overall looks awesome. Well, this thing turned into a virtual nightmare. So basically, doing some research on this thing basically got wet at some point in time. Because behind the DMD, the wood, there's a water line that's right about here. And then on the back, you can see someone repainted it, and you can see the bubbling. So basically, this thing got wet at some point in time, and inside the cabinet was redone. New speakers on the bottom. So then, but the game played. I played it. The boards seemed a little weird, but overall the game played. So my friend got this home, and he had it for about 2 days, and the whole game just tanked. And you completely tanked. So I went up, brought it over here. So the power board, 3 to 4 bridges were burnt. You had a ton of transistors that I've had to replace. I replaced all the capacitors. I replaced connectors. Here, connector over here, 2 on the bottom. Severely damaged board. New ribbon cables where I can get them, because some of these you can't get the right ones. But in the back of the board, there were multiple jumpers. Multiple people worked on the power board. It was such a hack job. The DMD driver board, I rebuilt as well. There were multiple jumpers on this one. I took those off, reran new tracers, new cable for the DMD. The flipper board was untouched. I rebuilt it and reflow the connectors, for the pins and the fuse holders, and then the CPU board. One of the problems was, there's severe damage on the bottom, so you had acid damage from the battery pack. But then the problem is, when I got it, every memory chip is socketed. Well, by factory, they're statically on the board. So clearly this thing had a significant amount of work done to it to have every one of these things pulled out and re-socketed. So, and then the back, there's jumper wires because of burn spots and acid damage. The guy had a replacement of the auxiliary board. 4 of the transistors on this were burned off. The control board that's underneath the playfield right about here had multiple burn transistors on it. So this thing was a virtual nightmare. The optics on the totem weren't working anymore. The optics for the Path of Adventure wasn't working. But as you see, the playfield looks awesome. So this, and the cabinet, this was lipstick on the Bulldog. Had original coil sleeves, springs, Nothing was touched underneath. Original flipper mechs. It's basically everything was done cosmetically to get this thing to look awesome. Now the biggest problem with this thing was, you had loose wires. There was a loose wire there. There were about a dozen loose wires on the bottom. There were a handful of loose wires in here. You had a bunch of them that were just held together with electrical tape. They weren't soldered together. It was a complete hatchet job. And then you had the soundboard. The soundboard was so destroyed that the capacitors wouldn't even stay on the board. You had to glue the capacitors, the two main drive capacitors. You had to glue them on the board to get them to stay, and then jumper wire from the leg of the capacitor to where it needed to go. So there were about 9 or 10 jumper wires on the bottom of that board. You could tell it was done by a couple different people, and the transistors were blown out. It was a complete disaster, this game. So basically, at this point, I've rebuilt the DMD board, the power board, the CPU board. The CPU board, I got it as best as I could at this point. I re-socketed some chips as well. That may be down the road a candidate for replacement to get a new CPU board with a new ROM and VRAM, which would be beneficial. The soundboard was so badly damaged that none of us could fix it, and it wasn't even worth fixing. So we got a pin soundboard. Now it had the flipper fidelity speakers in it, the upgraded speakers, and I went up taking this out because this is just stupid. This just adds complexity to the problem, especially with a pin sound board, and it's got its own controls and volume controls and everything else on top of the volume controls in the thing. This thing's just worthless. But at this point, everything is fully functional. Everything's been done underneath the playfield. New coils, sleeves, new springs. Everything's been readjusted. New plungers for a lot of the kickouts. New coil springs, everything for the Path of Adventure, so the path works fine. The optics were all taken out, and 2 were replaced. The other 2 were good. I cleaned them out, reflowed all the solder, so the optics are working. So the game basically now needs, new rubber. The rubber's decent, but could be replaced, and then cleaned up a little bit, and then eventually LED'd. The DMD's nice and bright now, and there's no lines or columns out. It's actually pretty decent. So the game plays pretty well. It's on my cart, so it's not pitch right, but I think the ball gets stuck because it's pitched well. But the sounds pretty awesome with a pin sound board, and the upgraded speakers make it real rich too. So, but game is done. We're ready to get this packed up and get it back home. So, thanks for watching.